Christmas morning devastation. I'm Jennifer Collins, 29 years old, watching my 6-year-old daughter Emma stare at empty hands while her cousins unwrap gift after gift. My parents distributed presents to everyone, absolutely everyone, except their own granddaughter. The Golden Child sisters twins got iPads, designer clothes, expensive toys. Emma got nothing. Not even acknowledgement. When I confronted them, my mother's response broke something inside me forever. Well, maybe if you'd made better life choices, your daughter would deserve nice things too. Before we dive into this heartbreaking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story resonates with you or if you've experienced family favoritism yourself, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Trust me, what happens next will shock you to your core. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. The morning started like every other Christmas at my parents' sprawling mansion in their upscale Connecticut neighborhood. The house looked like something out of a holiday magazine, with its perfectly coordinated decorations, towering Christmas tree, and expensive ornaments that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Everything had to be perfect in the Collins family home because image was everything to my parents, Robert and Linda Collins. My sister Katie arrived first with her husband David and their 4-year-old twins, Tyler and Taylor. Katie had always been the golden child, the one who did everything right according to our parents' standards. She married David Mitchell, a successful investment banker, lived in the right neighborhood, drove the right car, and produced the right kind of grandchildren. The twins were dressed in matching Christmas outfits that probably cost more than Emma's entire wardrobe, their blonde hair perfectly styled, looking like they stepped out of a catalog. Then there was me, Jennifer Collins, the family disappointment. At 29, I was an unmarried mother working as a nurse at the local hospital. I struggled financially, lived in a modest apartment, and drove a 10-year-old Honda that I prayed would start every morning. But I was independent, and I was raising my daughter Emma with all the love in my heart, even if I couldn't give her everything I wanted to. Emma had been talking about Christmas for weeks. At 6 years old, she still believed in the magic of Santa Claus and Christmas morning. She'd been so excited to spend Christmas at Grandma and Grandpa's house, telling me about all the things she hoped Santa would bring her. Nothing extravagant, just simple things like coloring books, maybe a new doll, or some puzzles. Her innocence and pure joy about the holiday made my heart ache because I knew how much this day meant to her. From the moment we walked through the door, I noticed the subtle signs that something was off. My parents greeted Katie's family with warm hugs and exclamations over how wonderful the twins looked. When they turned to Emma and me, their smiles seemed forced, their hugs perfunctory. During breakfast, they forgot to make Emma's favorite pancakes, even though I'd reminded them the week before. They didn't ask her about school or her upcoming dance recital, things that grandparents typically want to hear about. Katie was in her element, playing the perfect daughter role to perfection. She complimented our mother's cooking, praised the decorations, and made subtle digs at my life choices wrapped in sweet smiles and concerned sisterly advice. "Oh Jen, you look tired. Are you getting enough sleep? I know how hard it must be managing everything on your own." Each comment felt like a tiny knife, but I bit my tongue for Emma's sake. Even Grandma Rose, my father's 80-year-old mother who usually doted on Emma, seemed distant and uncomfortable. She kept glancing at my parents nervously, as if she was walking on eggshells. I should have seen the warning signs, should have realized something was being orchestrated, but I was too focused on making sure Emma had a magical Christmas morning. The gift distribution was always a big production in our family. My parents loved to play Santa and Mrs. Claus, making a grand ceremony out of handing out presents. They started with Tyler and Taylor, and I watched in amazement as pile after pile of expensive gifts appeared under their names. iPads, designer clothes, educational toys, art supplies, sports equipment, the latest video games. The twins squealed with delight as each new present was revealed, and my parents beamed with joy at their reactions. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes wide with wonder, waiting patiently for her turn. She clapped and cheered for her cousins, genuinely happy for them even as I noticed her little hands clasped tightly in her lap, trying to contain her own excitement. "Mommy, when is it my turn?" she whispered to me, and I assured her it would be soon, that Grandma and Grandpa were just saving the best for last. But as the minutes ticked by and more gifts appeared for everyone else, even presents for David and Katie, for Grandma Rose, for our parents' neighbors who'd stopped by, a cold dread began settling in my stomach. Emma's name wasn't being called. There was no pile of gifts with her name on them. My 6-year-old daughter was being systematically excluded from Christmas morning in her own grandparents' house. Emma's confusion was heartbreaking to watch. She kept looking around hopefully, expecting her name to be called next, trusting that there must be some explanation for why she was the only child not receiving gifts. The twins had moved on to showing off their new tablets, already engrossed in downloading games and apps, while Emma sat there with empty hands and a puzzled expression on her beautiful face. "Mommy, when is it my turn?" she asked again, this time a little louder, her voice carrying the first hint of uncertainty. The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I looked at my parents, expecting them to suddenly remember, to apologize for the oversight and produce a hidden stash of gifts for their granddaughter. Instead, they exchanged a look that made my blood run cold. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Standing up from the couch, I walked over to where my parents were sitting, my voice carefully controlled despite the rage building inside me. "Mom, Dad, I think you might have forgotten Emma's presents. Where are her gifts from Santa?" I asked, giving them every opportunity to fix this horrible mistake. My mother, Linda Collins, looked at me with cold eyes that I'd seen too many times in my life. Without missing a beat, without even a glance at her heartbroken granddaughter, she delivered the words that would haunt me forever. "Well, maybe if you'd made better life choices, your daughter would deserve nice things too." The room fell silent except for the sound of the twins playing with their new toys, oblivious to the cruelty unfolding around them. Emma looked up at me with wide, confused eyes, not understanding what her grandmother meant but sensing that something terrible had just happened. Katie had a barely concealed smirk on her face, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. David looked uncomfortable but said nothing, as usual choosing the path of least resistance rather than standing up for what was right. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Years of feeling like a disappointment, years of never being good enough, crystallized into this one devastating moment. But this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my innocent 6-year-old daughter who was being punished for circumstances beyond her control, for my so-called mistakes and failures as judged by people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, hoping I'd misheard, praying that my mother hadn't just said something so cruel about her own granddaughter. "My father, Robert Collins, decided to join the attack." "You heard your mother, Jennifer. We're not going to reward poor decisions and irresponsible behavior. Maybe this will teach you about consequences." His voice was matter of fact, as if he was discussing the weather rather than emotionally devastating a 6-year-old child on Christmas morning. Emma started to cry, not understanding why the adults were talking in angry voices or why she was suddenly at the center of a storm she couldn't comprehend. "Mommy, am I bad? Is that why Santa didn't come for me?" she sobbed, and those words shattered what was left of my heart. Katie chose that moment to twist the knife deeper. With false concern dripping from her voice, she said, "Oh my goodness, I just assumed you'd already given Emma her gifts at home. I thought that's why Mom and Dad didn't get her anything here. We didn't want to duplicate efforts." The lie was so smooth, so calculated, that I realized this entire scenario had been planned and orchestrated. Even Grandma Rose, who I'd always thought had a special bond with Emma, remained silent. When our eyes met across the room, she looked away quickly, loyalty to her son apparently more important than protecting her great-granddaughter's feelings. The betrayal from someone I'd trusted cut almost as deeply as my parents' cruelty. This wasn't a thoughtless oversight or a simple mistake. This was a deliberate, coordinated effort to humiliate my daughter and punish me for not living up to their impossible standards. They had planned this moment, discussed it, and decided that a 6-year-old child deserved to be emotionally crushed on Christmas morning because her mother wasn't perfect enough for their approval. The protective fury that rose up in me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Every maternal instinct I had screamed at me to defend my child, to fight back against these people who dared to hurt her innocent heart. I scooped Emma into my arms, holding her close as she continued to cry, her small body shaking with confusion and hurt. "How dare you," I said, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. "How dare you punish a 6-year-old child for decisions that had nothing to do with her? She is your granddaughter, your blood, and you just broke her heart on Christmas morning because you wanted to teach me a lesson?" My father's face turned red with anger. "Don't you dare take that tone with us in our own house, Jennifer. You're ungrateful and entitled, just like you've always been. We don't owe you anything, and we certainly don't owe anything to." He gestured dismissively toward Emma, as if she were an inconvenience rather than his granddaughter. "To what?" I demanded. "To your granddaughter? To an innocent child who loves you and looks up to you. Finish that sentence, Dad. Tell me exactly what my daughter is to you." Katie, sensing an opportunity to pile on, decided to join the attack. "Jen, you need to calm down. You're always so dramatic about everything. Maybe if you'd focused more on making responsible choices instead of playing the victim, Emma would have a stable 2-parent home and wouldn't have to depend on other people for Christmas gifts." The hypocrisy was staggering. Katie, who'd had everything handed to her, who'd married for security rather than love, who'd never struggled for anything in her life, lecturing me about responsibility while my daughter cried in my arms. "A stable home?" I shot back. "Emma has the most stable, loving home possible. She has a mother who works 2 jobs to provide for her, who reads to her every night, who shows up to every school event, who loves her unconditionally. What she doesn't need is toxic grandparents who use Christmas presents as weapons to hurt children." David, Katie's husband, shifted uncomfortably in his chair but remained silent. Even when a child was being emotionally abused right in front of him, he couldn't find the courage to speak up. His silence was almost as damning as my family's act of cruelty. At that moment, Mrs. Williams, our longtime neighbor, arrived with a plate of Christmas cookies as she did every year. She walked into what must have looked like a war zone, with me holding a crying 6-year-old while the adults shouted at each other. The shock on her face was immediate and obvious. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking from my parents to Emma's tear-stained face. "Emma, sweetheart, what's wrong?" Before anyone could stop her, Emma looked up at Mrs. Williams with innocent honesty and said, "Grandma and Grandpa gave presents to everyone but me. They said I don't deserve nice things because Mommy made bad choices. But I don't understand what I did wrong." The horrified expression on Mrs. Williams' face said everything. Here was an outside observer, someone with no stake in our family drama, witnessing the casual cruelty being inflicted on a child. Her reaction confirmed what I already knew: this wasn't normal family tension or tough love. This was emotional abuse. "Robert, Linda, Mrs. Williams said slowly, "Surely there's been some misunderstanding. Emma is just a baby." My mother's mask slipped completely then. "Mind your own business, Patricia. This is a family matter, and frankly, Jennifer needs to learn that actions have consequences. We're not going to enable her poor choices by spoiling her daughter." I'd had enough. Setting Emma down gently, I knelt in front of my parents and spoke with deadly calm. "You have exactly one chance to apologize to your granddaughter and fix this situation. One chance to show that you have even a shred of decency left. If you can't do that, if you can't find it in your hearts to treat an innocent child with basic kindness, then we're leaving and we're never coming back." My father stood up, his face twisted with anger. "Don't you dare threaten us, young lady. We won't be manipulated by your emotional blackmail. You made your bed with your irresponsible behavior, and now you're lying in it. If you don't like it, there's the door." Katie nodded approvingly. "Exactly. You can't just waltz in here making demands and ruining Christmas for everyone else because you didn't get your way. Some of us actually care about family harmony." The irony was breathtaking. They were accusing me of ruining Christmas when they were the ones who had orchestrated this entire cruel scenario. Even Grandma Rose continued her silence, and I realized that the woman I'd thought loved Emma unconditionally had chosen her loyalty to my father over protecting an innocent child. Mrs. Williams stepped closer to Emma, her voice gentle but her expression furious. "Emma, honey, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes adults make very poor choices, and this is one of those times." I couldn't stay in that house another minute. The toxicity was suffocating, and I needed to get Emma away from these people before they could damage her any further. Gathering our coats with shaking hands, I picked up my daughter and headed for the door. "Are we never going to see Grandma and Grandpa again?" Emma asked as I buckled her into her car seat, her voice small and confused. The question broke my heart because I could hear the hope in her voice, the part of her that still wanted to believe her grandparents loved her despite what had just happened. "I don't know, sweetheart," I answered honestly, fighting back my own tears. "Sometimes people we love hurt us very badly, and we have to protect ourselves from them, even when it makes us sad." Mrs. Williams had followed us outside, her face etched with concern and disgust at what she'd witnessed. "Jennifer, honey, I am so sorry. In 40 years of knowing your parents, I have never seen anything so cruel and unnecessary. That beautiful little girl did nothing to deserve that treatment. Her validation meant more to me than she could ever know. After being gaslit and manipulated by my family for so long, having an objective witness confirm that what I'd experienced was wrong gave me strength. Thank you for saying that, Mrs. Williams." For a minute in there, I started to wonder if I was overreacting. "Overreacting," she repeated incredulously. "Jennifer, what they did to Emma was psychological abuse, plain and simple. No child should ever be made to feel unwanted or unworthy, especially not by their own grandparents on Christmas morning." When we got home to our small apartment, Emma's breakdown began in earnest. All the confusion and hurt she'd been holding in came pouring out as she sobbed in my arms, asking questions I didn't know how to answer. "Why don't Grandma and Grandpa love me? What did I do wrong? Am I not a good girl? Is it because I don't have a daddy like Tyler and Taylor?" Each question felt like a knife to my heart. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that some adults are capable of cruelty toward children? How do you help a child understand that their worth isn't determined by how others treat them, especially when those others are supposed to be sources of unconditional love? I held her until she fell asleep, exhausted from crying and emotional trauma. As I watched her peaceful face, I felt a crushing weight of guilt settle over me. Had my choices really led to this? Was I responsible for my daughter's pain because I dared to have her without being married? Because I'd chosen love over their narrow definition of respectability? The phone started ringing around dinner time. First it was my father, his voice cold and unrepentant. "I hope you're satisfied with the scene you caused today, Jennifer. Maybe this will teach you some responsibility and help you understand that your actions affect more people than just yourself." No apology for Emma. No acknowledgement that they'd hurt an innocent child. Just more blame and manipulation, trying to make me feel guilty for protecting my daughter from their cruelty. Katie called next, her voice dripping with false concern. "Jen, I think we need to talk about what happened today. I'm worried about Emma, about how this kind of drama might be affecting her. Maybe we can work something out if you're willing to be reasonable and acknowledge your part in this situation." The audacity was stunning. She wanted me to apologize for my reaction to them emotionally abusing my child. She wanted me to take responsibility for their cruelty and somehow make amends for having the nerve to defend my daughter. When I refused to engage with their manipulation tactics, the calls became more frequent and more vicious. Extended family members started reaching out, having been fed carefully crafted versions of the story that painted me as an ungrateful daughter who'd caused unnecessary drama over nothing. Cousins I'd grown up with suddenly had strong opinions about my parenting and my life choices, based entirely on my parents' narrative. The isolation was swift and brutal. People I'd known my entire life were choosing sides without hearing my version of events, and most were choosing the side with money and social standing. I found myself questioning everything, wondering if I was wrong to protect Emma from people who claimed to love her but showed it in such destructive ways. But then I would look at my daughter, see the sadness in her eyes and the way she flinched when I mentioned her grandparents, and I knew I'd made the right choice. No relationship was worth allowing my child to be emotionally abused, not even family relationships. Emma's psychological well-being was more important than maintaining peace with toxic people, even if those toxic people were my own parents. What I didn't anticipate was how far my parents would go to punish me for standing up to them. The retaliation began within days of our Christmas confrontation, and it was systematic, calculated, and designed to destroy every aspect of my life that they could reach. The first attack came at my workplace. My supervisor called me into her office 3 days after Christmas, looking uncomfortable and confused. "Jennifer, I received a very disturbing phone call from someone claiming to be your father. He expressed concerns about your mental stability and suggested that you might be an unfit mother. He implied that your judgment might be compromised and that perhaps we should be concerned about your ability to care for patients safely." My blood ran cold. My job as a nurse was everything to me, not just financially but professionally. I'd worked hard to build a reputation as a skilled, compassionate caregiver, and my patients trusted me. The idea that my parents would try to destroy my career out of spite was almost incomprehensible. "Mrs. Henderson, I can assure you that whatever my father told you is completely false. This stems from a family disagreement, and I'm appalled that he would try to involve my workplace in a personal matter." Fortunately, my supervisor knew my work ethic and character well enough to take my father's call with a grain of salt. But the damage was done, the seed of doubt planted. I would have to work twice as hard to prove my competence, all because my parents couldn't accept that I'd chosen my daughter's well-being over their control. Katie launched her own campaign on social media, posting carefully worded messages about difficult family members and protecting children from toxic influences. She shared articles about parental alienation and the importance of maintaining family relationships, painting herself as the reasonable family member trying to keep everyone together while I was portrayed as the unstable troublemaker. Her posts were subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability, but anyone who knew our family situation could read between the lines. She was building a narrative that positioned me as an unfit mother who was using Emma as a weapon against the family, while she and our parents were the victims of my unreasonable behavior. The extended family manipulation was perhaps the most insidious part of their campaign. Aunts and uncles I'd known since childhood started calling, having received carefully crafted versions of the Christmas incident that minimized my parents' cruelty and maximized my overreaction. They'd been told that I'd caused a huge scene over a simple misunderstanding, that I'd denied Emma the chance to spend time with loving grandparents over a minor slight. "Jennifer, your Aunt Carol thinks maybe you should consider family counseling to work through these issues," my mother suggested during one of her manipulative phone calls. "She's concerned that you're letting pride get in the way of what's best for Emma. After all, we're the only grandparents she has." The subtle threats continued to escalate. My father mentioned grandparents' rights during one particularly hostile conversation, implying that they might pursue legal action to force visitation with Emma. The idea that they could use the court system to continue their emotional abuse of my daughter terrified me. They also began interfering with Emma's school, calling the principal to express concerns about changes in Emma's behavior since Christmas. They painted themselves as worried grandparents who'd been unfairly cut off from their granddaughter, suggesting that my decision to limit contact was harming Emma's emotional development. When the school counselor called to schedule a meeting, I realized how far-reaching their influence was. They were trying to build a case that I was the problem, that my decision to protect Emma from their cruelty was actually a form of abuse itself. The financial sabotage hit particularly hard. My parents had previously mentioned setting up a college fund for Emma, nothing formal but enough to give me hope that her future education would be secure. During one spiteful phone call, my father informed me that not only would there be no college fund, but they were also discontinuing the emergency financial help they'd occasionally provided when Emma needed medical care or when unexpected expenses arose. "Actions have consequences, Jennifer," he said coldly. If you want to cut us out of Emma's life, then we'll cut our financial support out of yours. Let's see how independent you really are. Mrs. Williams became a target too. My parents began pressuring her to stop interfering in family business, suggesting that her support of me was somehow inappropriate. They questioned her motives and implied that she was overstepping boundaries by offering comfort to Emma and me during this difficult time. The character assassination campaign extended to their social circle, where they spread carefully edited versions of our conflict to anyone who would listen. They portrayed themselves as heartbroken grandparents who'd been cruelly denied access to their granddaughter by their unstable, vindictive daughter. The story they told bore little resemblance to the truth, but it was effective in garnering sympathy and support for their position. What hurt them most was watching Emma struggle with the aftermath. She didn't understand why she couldn't see Grandma Rose anymore, or why family members who'd previously been kind to her were suddenly absent from our lives. She blamed herself, convinced that she'd done something wrong to cause this family fracture. "Maybe if I'm extra good, Grandma and Grandpa will love me again," she said one night as I tucked her into bed, breaking my heart all over again. Despite everything they'd done, she still wanted their approval, still believed that somehow she could earn their love if she just tried hard enough. I realized that my parents weren't just trying to punish me, they were attempting to systematically destroy my life to prove they were right. They wanted me to come crawling back, to apologize for protecting my daughter, to accept their treatment of Emma as appropriate. They were willing to hurt an innocent child indefinitely to maintain their position of control and superiority. As the weeks passed and the harassment continued, unexpected allies began emerging from the shadows, revealing truths that painted an even darker picture of my family's dysfunction than I'd realized. Mrs. Williams was the first to break her silence completely. During one of her visits to check on Emma and me, she sat me down with a cup of tea and a serious expression. "Jennifer, there are things I should have said years ago, things I should have done to protect you when you were growing up. I've watched your parents' behavior for decades, and what happened at Christmas wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a pattern I should have spoken up about long ago." She went on to describe years of witnessing the favoritism between Katie and me, moments when my parents had been emotionally cruel or manipulative that I'd buried or rationalized as normal family dynamics. "Your mother used to tell people at neighborhood gatherings that you were her challenging child, that Katie was the one who made her proud while you gave her nothing but headaches. I should have said something then." Her words were both validating and heartbreaking. It confirmed what I'd always suspected but been afraid to acknowledge, that the differential treatment wasn't in my head, wasn't something I'd imagined or exaggerated. An objective observer had been watching it happen for years. "If this ever goes to court," Mrs. Williams continued, "if they try to pursue grandparents' rights or challenge your custody in any way, I will testify on your behalf. What I witnessed on Christmas morning was emotional abuse, pure and simple, and no child should be subjected to that kind of treatment." The next revelation came from an unexpected source. Grandma Rose appeared at my door one evening, looking frail and nervous, glancing over her shoulder as if she expected to be followed. At 80 years old, she'd somehow managed to take a taxi to my apartment without my parents knowing. "Jennifer, sweetheart, I need to tell you something," she said, settling into my small kitchen chair with obvious relief. "Your father threatened to put me in a nursing home if I continued to support you and Emma. He said I was undermining his authority and enabling your bad behavior by showing you kindness." The cruelty of using an elderly woman's fear of losing her independence as a weapon against me and Emma was staggering. Grandma Rose had been afraid to speak up for her great-granddaughter because she was being blackmailed with the threat of institutional care. "I should have stood up for that precious baby on Christmas morning," she continued, tears in her eyes. "I should have told your parents exactly what I thought of their behavior, but I was scared. I'm ashamed of myself for choosing my own comfort over Emma's well-being." Her honesty was both painful and healing. It helped me understand the family dynamics better and confirmed that my parents' control extended far beyond just me and Emma. They were willing to manipulate and threaten anyone who didn't fall in line with their narrative. But the most shocking revelation came from David, Katie's husband, during an unexpected visit to my apartment. He looked haggard and uncomfortable, clearly struggling with whatever had brought him to my door. "Jennifer, I need to tell you something that's been eating me alive since Christmas," he began, refusing to sit down as if he might need to make a quick escape. "The whole thing was planned. Katie suggested it to your parents weeks before Christmas. She said it was time you learned some consequences for your choices, that spoiling Emma was just enabling your irresponsible behavior." I felt sick to my stomach. My own sister had orchestrated my daughter's humiliation, had convinced our parents that emotionally abusing a 6-year-old was an appropriate way to teach me a lesson about responsibility. She told them that giving Emma gifts was the same as rewarding you for having a child out of wedlock, David continued, his voice filled with disgust. She said Emma needed to understand that actions have consequences, even if she was too young to understand what actions she was supposedly being punished for. The premeditation made everything so much worse. This hadn't been a spontaneous decision or a moment of poor judgment. It had been a calculated plan to hurt my daughter in order to control me. David also revealed financial information that shed new light on my parents' behavior. "They're not as wealthy as they pretend to be, Jennifer. Your father made some bad investments, and they're under financial pressure they don't want anyone to know about. Katie thinks that's part of why they're so angry with you, because you represent expenses they can't afford and responsibilities they don't want. This explains some of their recent behavior, the desperate need to maintain appearances while secretly struggling with money problems. It didn't excuse their treatment of Emma, but it provided context for their increased hostility and controlling behavior." The community response, when people learned the true story, was overwhelmingly supportive. Emma's teacher mentioned that several other parents had asked about her after Christmas break, concerned about changes in her behavior and demeanor. When I explained what had happened, the reaction was immediate and outraged. "Mrs. Collins, I want you to know that Emma is welcome in our home anytime," said Sarah Martinez, the mother of Emma's best friend Lucy. "What your parents did was inexcusable, and Emma should never be made to feel unwanted or unloved. You're both part of our extended family now." Similar offers of support came from unexpected places. Co-workers at the hospital offered to help with childcare during difficult shifts. Neighbors brought meals and offered emotional support. Emma's dance teacher waived her fees for the rest of the year, saying that every child deserved to pursue activities that brought them joy regardless of family drama. I also consulted with a family law attorney to understand my rights and options. The lawyer was clear that while grandparents' rights do exist in some circumstances, my parents would have a difficult time proving that denying them access to Emma wasn't in her best interest, especially given their behavior on Christmas and the ongoing harassment. "Document everything," the attorney advised. "Every threatening phone call, every attempt to interfere with your work or Emma's school, every manipulative message. If they continue this pattern of behavior, we can seek a restraining order to protect you and Emma from further harassment." Emma, throughout all of this chaos, showed a resilience that amazed me. While she was clearly hurt and confused by her grandparents' behavior, she began to understand that their treatment of her wasn't a reflection of her worth as a person. "Mommy, Mrs. Martinez says that some people don't know how to love right," she told me one day after playing at Lucy's house. "She says that doesn't mean we're not lovable, it just means they're broken inside." The wisdom from the mouth of a 6-year-old was profound and healing. Emma was learning, perhaps too early but necessarily, that other people's behavior toward us doesn't define our value as human beings. Just when I thought my parents couldn't sink any lower, they proved me wrong by escalating their campaign to a level I never could have imagined. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was getting Emma ready for school, a call that would turn our lives completely upside down. "Ms. Collins, this is Janet Williams with Child Protective Services. We've received a report expressing concerns about your daughter's welfare, and I need to schedule a visit to your home as soon as possible." The words hit me like a physical blow, leaving me speechless with shock and terror. My parents had actually called Child Protective Services on me. They had filed a false report claiming I was an unfit mother, using the power of the state to try to take my daughter away from me because I dared to protect her from their emotional abuse. The audacity and cruelty of it took my breath away. The CPS investigation was the most terrifying experience of my life. Ms. Williams arrived at our apartment with a clipboard and a serious expression, examining everything from our refrigerator contents to Emma's bedroom to my work schedule. She interviewed Emma privately, asking her questions about her home life, her safety, and her relationship with me. I tried to stay calm during the process, but inside I was panicking. What if Emma said something innocent that was taken out of context? What if the investigator believed my parents' lies? What if I lost my daughter because toxic family members had weaponized the child protection system against us? Katie provided testimony to the CPS worker, painting herself as a concerned aunt who'd witnessed troubling behavior. She described me as emotionally unstable, claiming I'd had outbursts of inappropriate anger and had isolated Emma from loving family members who were trying to help. "I'm worried about Emma's emotional development," Katie told the investigator with false tears in her eyes. "Jennifer has been keeping her away from her grandparents over minor disagreements, and it's affecting the poor child's ability to maintain family relationships. She needs stability and consistency, not drama and conflict." The twisted irony of Katie portraying herself as concerned for Emma's welfare while having orchestrated the Christmas abuse was almost too much to bear. She was using the system designed to protect children as a weapon to continue harming my daughter. My parents escalated their workplace harassment as well, now contacting the hospital's board of directors with claims that I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous to patients. They provided carefully edited accounts of our family conflicts, suggesting that someone who would deny children access to loving grandparents might not have the judgment necessary for medical care. The professional attack was devastating because my career was built on trust and competence. Even though my supervisors knew me well and didn't believe the accusations, the mere fact that formal complaints had been filed created a cloud of suspicion that was difficult to dispel completely. During Emma's next medical checkup, I discovered that my parents had also been calling her pediatrician, expressing concerns about changes in her behavior and suggesting that she might need psychological evaluation due to the trauma of being separated from her grandparents. They were trying to build a medical record that supported their narrative of me as a harmful parent. The financial warfare reached new levels of cruelty when Emma needed emergency medical care for a severe ear infection that required specialist treatment. My parents had previously helped with medical expenses when my insurance didn't cover everything, but now they refused to provide any assistance whatsoever. "You want to be independent?" my father said coldly when I called asking for help with the medical bills. "Then be independent. Don't come crying to us when your choices have real-world financial consequences." They organized a systematic campaign to isolate us from extended family, hosting gatherings and celebrations that pointedly excluded Emma and me while making sure everyone knew we weren't invited. Cousins who'd grown up with me were told that I'd become unstable and vindictive, that I was using Emma as a weapon against the family. The psychological pressure on Emma was intense. She started having nightmares about people taking her away from me, asking repeatedly if she was going to have to live with strangers. The CPS investigation, while ultimately finding no evidence of neglect or abuse, had planted seeds of fear in her 6-year-old mind about the stability of our life together. Grandma Rose, despite her earlier visit and apology, was forced back into compliance with my parents' demands. When I called to check on her, she sounded scared and distant, clearly having been threatened again with nursing home placement if she continued to support us. "I can't talk to you anymore, dear," she whispered into the phone. "Robert says it's for the best, that I need to stop encouraging your defiant behavior. I'm sorry, but I have to do what he says." The legal threats became more specific and frightening. My father consulted with an attorney about pursuing emergency custody of Emma, claiming that I was psychologically damaging her by denying her access to family relationships. He sent me copies of legal documents outlining grandparents' rights statutes, making it clear that he was prepared to use every legal weapon at his disposal. Mrs. Williams, our neighbor who'd been supporting us, became a target of harassment as well. My parents pressured other neighbors to ostracize her for interfering in family matters, and they began making complaints to the homeowners association about minor infractions around her property. "They're trying to make my life miserable because I witnessed what they did to Emma," she told me during one of our conversations. "But I won't be intimidated. That little girl needs someone in her corner who isn't afraid of their threats and manipulation." Emma's school performance began to suffer under the stress. Her teacher called to express concern about her withdrawal and anxiety, noting that she'd gone from being a bright, engaged student to someone who seemed constantly worried and distracted. "She keeps asking me if people can take children away from their mommies," her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, confided. "I'm not sure what's going on at home, but Emma seems to be carrying a lot of fear for such a young child." The constant stress was taking a toll on my health as well. I wasn't sleeping properly, constantly worried about the next attack, the next false accusation, the next attempt to undermine my relationship with Emma. I was losing weight, developing stress-related physical symptoms, and struggling to maintain the cheerful, confident demeanor Emma needed from me. But perhaps the cruelest aspect of their campaign was the way they tried to turn Emma against me. During the brief, supervised phone calls that were part of the CPS investigation, they would tell her how much they missed her and how sad they were that "Mommy won't let us see you anymore. If you really want to see Grandma and Grandpa again, you need to tell the nice lady that Mommy gets very angry sometimes," my mother coached Emma during one call that I was required to monitor. "Tell her you want to spend more time with us because we love you so much." The manipulation of a 6-year-old child's emotions was the final straw. They weren't just trying to punish me anymore, they were actively trying to psychologically damage my daughter to get what they wanted. Every boundary of decency had been crossed, every line of acceptable behavior had been obliterated. The formal CPS hearing was scheduled for a cold February morning, 6 weeks after the initial report. I walked into that courthouse knowing that everything I loved most in the world was at stake, that my parents were willing to destroy an innocent child's life to maintain their control and prove their point. Emma had to testify, which broke my heart. At 6 years old, she was asked to explain her relationship with me, her feelings about her grandparents, and her understanding of the family conflict. Watching her sitting in that witness chair, trying to answer complex questions about adult behaviors she couldn't fully comprehend, was one of the most difficult moments of my life. But Emma's testimony was also our salvation. With heartbreaking honesty, she told the judge about Christmas morning, about feeling confused and sad when she didn't get any presents, about not understanding why Grandma and Grandpa seemed angry with her. "They said I don't deserve nice things because Mommy made bad choices," she said in her small, clear voice. "But I don't know what bad choices means, and I don't understand why that makes them not love me anymore." When asked about her home life with me, Emma's face lit up despite the serious setting. She talked about our bedtime stories, our weekend adventures, the way I helped her with homework and celebrated her small victories. She described feeling safe and loved and protected, which was exactly what a child should feel with their parent. Dr. Martinez, Emma's pediatrician, provided testimony that completely contradicted my parents' claims about her psychological well-being. She confirmed that Emma was a healthy, well-adjusted child who showed no signs of neglect or abuse. The anxiety and behavioral changes my parents had reported to CPS had started immediately after Christmas and were consistent with emotional trauma from that event, not from her relationship with me. In my professional opinion, Dr. Martinez testified, Emma's distress stems from the family conflict and the uncertainty about her relationship with her extended family, not from any inadequacy in her mother's care. Jennifer Collins is an attentive, loving parent who has consistently prioritized her daughter's well-being. Mrs. Williams took the stand as a character witness, describing years of observing my parenting and the events of Christmas morning. Her testimony was powerful because she had no ulterior motive, no stake in the outcome beyond wanting to see a child protected from harmful treatment. "I've watched Jennifer raise that little girl with nothing but love and dedication," she said firmly. "What I witnessed on Christmas morning was not a family disagreement or tough love. It was deliberate cruelty toward an innocent child, and Jennifer's reaction was that of any good mother protecting her baby." But the most damaging testimony for my parents came from David, Katie's husband, who'd finally found the courage to tell the truth. Despite Katie's obvious fury, He took the stand and revealed the premeditation behind Christmas morning, the discussions about teaching me a lesson through Emma's humiliation. My wife convinced her parents that excluding Emma from Christmas gifts would be an effective way to punish Jennifer for her life choices, he testified, his voice heavy with shame. It was planned weeks in advance. They discussed how to maximize the emotional impact while maintaining plausible deniability. David also revealed financial information that painted my parents' motivations in a new light. Their recent money troubles, their resentment toward having to provide any support for Emma, their view of my daughter as a financial burden they shouldn't have to bear. Even more shocking was Grandma Rose's testimony. Despite my parents' threats, the elderly woman had found the strength to defy her son and tell the truth. With her hands shaking but her voice steady, she described the threats she'd received for supporting Emma and me, the way my father had used her fear of nursing home placement to silence her. "I've been afraid to speak up," she admitted, "but I can't live with myself knowing I stayed silent while they hurt that precious child. Emma has done nothing wrong, and she doesn't deserve to be punished for adult conflicts." Katie's testimony backfired spectacularly. Her attempts to paint me as unstable and vindictive came across as petty and cruel, especially in light of David's revelations about her role in orchestrating the Christmas abuse. When pressed by my attorney about her motivations, cracks began to show in her composed facade. "Jennifer has always been jealous of my success," she said, her mask slipping to reveal the venom underneath. "She had a child irresponsibly and expected everyone else to help support her choices. Maybe if she'd made better decisions, her daughter wouldn't be in this situation." The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as Katie's true nature was revealed. Here was a woman who admitted to planning the emotional abuse of her 6-year-old niece and showed no remorse for the harm caused. My parents' testimony was equally damaging to their case. My father's arrogance and refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing alienated the court, while my mother's continued insistence that Emma needed to learn consequences for my actions revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of child psychology and appropriate grandparent behavior. "Your Honor," my mother said with shocking confidence, "we were trying to teach valuable lessons about responsibility and consequences. Children need to understand that actions have repercussions, even if those actions are taken by their parents." The community support that emerged during the hearing was overwhelming. Emma's teacher, my supervisor from the hospital, neighbors, and friends who knew us well, all testified about my character and parenting abilities. Person after person described me as a dedicated mother who put Emma's needs first, who worked hard to provide for her daughter, who created a loving and stable home environment. The judge's decision was swift and decisive. Not only was the CPS case dismissed completely, but she also granted a restraining order that prevented my parents from contacting Emma or me directly, from interfering with her school or medical care, and from making further false reports to authorities. This court finds that the reports made to Child Protective Services were not only unfounded but appear to have been filed in bad faith as a form of harassment and intimidation, Judge Patricia Henderson stated firmly. The evidence clearly shows that Emma Collins is a well-cared-for, loved child whose best interests are consistently prioritized by her mother. She went on to criticize my parents' behavior directly. The treatment of this child on Christmas morning, as described by multiple witnesses, constitutes emotional abuse. Using a 6-year-old as a weapon in adult conflicts is unacceptable and harmful. This court will not tolerate further attempts to use the legal system to continue that abuse. The relief I felt was indescribable, but it was tempered by sadness for what we'd lost and what Emma had endured. My daughter had been forced to grow up too quickly, to learn harsh lessons about family loyalty and adult cruelty that no child should have to face. As we left the courthouse, Emma slipped her small hand into mine and looked up at me with eyes that seemed older than her 6 years. "Mommy, does this mean we're safe now?" she asked, and I realized that the real healing was just beginning. The immediate aftermath of the court victory brought a sense of relief that was almost overwhelming, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives that would require intentional healing and rebuilding. The legal protection was in place, but the emotional scars left by months of family warfare would take much longer to fade. Emma's recovery became my primary focus. The trauma of Christmas morning, followed by months of uncertainty and adult conflict, had affected her in ways that weren't immediately obvious. She had nightmares about people trying to take her away from me, anxiety about family gatherings and holidays, and a newfound wariness around adults that broke my heart. We started seeing a family therapist who specialized in childhood trauma, Dr. Sarah Chen, who helped both of us process what we'd experienced. Emma needed to understand that her grandparents' behavior wasn't her fault, that she hadn't done anything to deserve their cruelty, and that their inability to love her properly was about their own brokenness, not her worthiness. Sometimes adults make very bad choices that hurt children, Dr. Chen explained to Emma in age-appropriate terms. When that happens, it's not because the children are bad or unlovable. It's because the adults have problems inside their hearts that make it hard for them to love the right way. Through play therapy and gentle conversations, Emma slowly began to rebuild her sense of security and self-worth. She started sleeping through the night again, laughing more freely, and trusting that our small family unit was stable and permanent. Mrs. Williams became like a grandmother to Emma, filling the void left by my parents' absence with genuine love and support. She attended Emma's dance recitals, helped with homework, and provided the kind of unconditional acceptance that every child deserves from their extended family. Every child needs adults who believe in them, Mrs. Williams told me one afternoon as we watched Emma play in her garden. If her biological grandparents can't provide that love, then we'll make sure she has it from people who truly care about her well-being. The relationship that developed between them was beautiful to watch. Emma would run to Mrs. Williams' house after school, sharing stories about her day and seeking comfort when things were difficult. In return, Mrs. Williams found new purpose and joy in being part of Emma's life, creating the kind of intergenerational bond that should have existed with my parents. Grandma Rose, freed from my father's threats by the restraining order, was able to reconnect with us as well. I helped her transition to an independent living facility where she felt safe and could make her own choices about family relationships. Seeing her with Emma again, watching them rebuild their connection, was one of the most healing experiences of this entire ordeal. "I should have protected you both sooner," Grandma Rose told me during one of our visits, tears in her eyes as she watched Emma show her a drawing she'd made. "I was scared and weak when you needed me to be brave and strong. But I promise you, I'll never let anyone hurt this precious child again if I can help it." My career actually flourished in the aftermath of this crisis. My colleagues at the hospital, having witnessed my strength and resilience during the legal battle, developed a new level of respect for my character and judgment. The false accusations my parents had made only served to highlight my professionalism when they proved to be completely unfounded. I was promoted to a supervisory position that came with better hours and significantly better pay, allowing me to provide more stability for Emma while having more time to spend with her. The financial independence reduced my stress considerably and gave me confidence that we could build a secure future together without depending on anyone else. The extended family situation resolved itself in unexpected ways. Several relatives, once they learned the full truth about what had happened, reached out to apologize for believing my parents' version of events without hearing my side. Some relationships were permanently damaged, but others became stronger than they'd ever been before. My cousin Maria, who'd initially criticized me based on my parents' lies, became one of our strongest supporters once she understood the reality of the situation. "I'm ashamed that I believed their manipulation without talking to you first," she admitted. "But I want to make it right now. Emma is welcome in our family anytime, and you both deserve better than what they put you through." Katie and David's marriage didn't survive the aftermath of the court case. David's testimony about Katie's role in orchestrating Emma's abuse created irreparable damage between them. He filed for divorce, seeking primary custody of the twins based on concerns about Katie's judgment and character. "I can't stay married to someone who would plan to hurt a 6-year-old child," he confided to me during one of our conversations. "If she could do that to Emma, what might she do to our boys if they ever disappoint her? I won't take that risk." The divorce proceedings revealed even more about Katie's true character, including financial manipulations and attempts to turn the twins against their father. The woman I'd once looked up to as my successful older sister was exposed as someone capable of extraordinary cruelty and selfishness. My parents, meanwhile, found themselves increasingly isolated as more people learned the truth about their behavior. Their attempts to maintain their social standing crumbled when friends and neighbors understood what they'd done to Emma. The community that had once respected them began to see them as they truly were. Emma and I created new holiday traditions that focused on love, gratitude, and service to others rather than material gifts and family drama. We volunteered at local charities, invited lonely neighbors to share meals with us, and celebrated the true meaning of family as people who choose to love and support each other. "Mommy, I like our Christmas better than the old Christmas," Emma told me as we delivered cookies to elderly residents at Grandma Rose's facility. "This Christmas makes my heart feel warm instead of scared." Her resilience and wisdom continued to amaze me. She learned to set boundaries with toxic people, to trust her own feelings about how others treated her, and to value genuine love over conditional approval. These were difficult lessons for such a young child, but they would serve her well throughout her life. The legal aftermath continued for months as my parents attempted to appeal the restraining order and challenge the court's findings. Each attempt failed, and eventually their attorney advised them to stop pursuing legal remedies and focus on rebuilding their lives. Emma's relationship with her cousins, Tyler and Taylor, was maintained through carefully supervised visits with David. She was able to continue those important friendships while being protected from Katie's influence and my parents' manipulation. As Emma approached her 7th birthday, I reflected on how much we'd both grown through this ordeal. We'd learned that family isn't defined by blood relationships but by love, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. We'd discovered that we were stronger than we'd ever imagined, capable of surviving betrayal and building something beautiful from the ashes. "I used to think family meant you had to accept bad treatment because people were related to you," I told Dr. Chen during one of our sessions. "Now I understand that real family are the people who show up with love and support, who protect you when you're vulnerable, who celebrate your successes and comfort you during failures." Emma's birthday party that year was small but filled with genuine love. Mrs. Williams, Grandma Rose, David and the twins, my cousin Maria and her children, neighbors, and friends who'd become our chosen family. As I watched Emma blow out her candles, surrounded by people who truly cared about her happiness, I knew we'd made the right choices. The little girl who'd sat empty-handed on Christmas morning was now a confident, joyful child who understood her own worth and value. She'd learned that love isn't something you have to earn through perfect behavior or meeting other people's expectations. Love is something freely given by people who choose to see your inherent worth and beauty. Looking toward the future, I felt hope instead of fear, excitement instead of anxiety. Emma and I had survived the worst kind of family betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to each other than ever before. We'd built a life based on authentic relationships and genuine love, surrounded by people who celebrated who we are rather than trying to change us into someone we're not. The scars from this experience would always be with us, but they'd become sources of strength rather than shame. We'd learned to protect what matters most, to stand up for ourselves and each other, and to create the kind of family we'd always deserved. As Emma settled into bed that night, she looked up at me with eyes full of trust and love. "Mommy, I'm glad it's just us. I like our family the best." In that moment, I knew that everything we'd endured had been worth it to reach this place of peace, security, and genuine happiness. The greatest gift I could give my daughter wasn't the perfect extended family I'd once hoped for, but the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally, protected fiercely, and valued completely just as she was. And sometimes, that's more than enough, that's everything. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace with toxic family members and protecting someone you love? Have you experienced favoritism or emotional abuse disguised as family dynamics? I want to hear your stories in the comments below because sharing these experiences helps us all feel less alone in our struggles. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own family challenges, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and building the life you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story, for supporting Emma and me through your kind comments and messages, and for reminding us that love comes in many forms. May you all find the courage to protect what matters most and surround yourselves with people who celebrate your worth. Wishing you and your families genuine love, authentic relationships, and the strength to create your own definition of home.